Awesome, thank you. Ooh, that was loud, wasn't it? So, I'm always well impressed by anyone that makes it to the last few sessions of the day. Like the fact you're not all in the pub, well done. I'll try and make this as painless as possible for you all. I do have like 70 slides because I didn't realise it was only a 30-minute talk, so it might suddenly speed up, but we'll see what happens. Helpfully, I've also missed a really important slide which tells you what I am, what I do, that kind of thing. If you want to know that information, you can just go and find me on Twitter at Hannah J. Thorpe. Occasionally I respond. I'm notoriously bad at that, so feel free to harass me if you have questions. And we'll get stuck in. So when I think about site architecture, I always imagine this, like a really crappy smart object from PowerPoint. And I'm like, well, that's how you build an architecture, obviously. And I tend to get quite frustrated when clients ask me about it, because I'm like, this stuff is boring. Like, who genuinely cares about a site architecture? How often with your clients do you even notice? Until something breaks. Because when something breaks, like this microphone, when something breaks, you're suddenly stuck and you're like, what's the root cause? And frequently the root cause is actually your site architecture, which is really the foundation of how Google and users understand your site. I like that someone's fixing the mic. Great work. So I'm going to just start with the basics, because that's kind of, hopefully, all the stuff that you know. Amazing. We can be mic buddies. Cool. So I can switch to this one? Yes? Great. So these are the fundamentals. Boring stuff. Use a pyramid structure. Wouldn't it be nice if everything was only 3 clicks away? Lovely. You should be doing all of this stuff in your sleep. And that's kind of how it's always been. Until Google started running updates and we started learning a bit more about actually how crawlers work. And what we found here is that firstly, Google updated its policy on doorway pages. Does everyone know what a doorway page is? Yeah, great. So these are lots of words, but these are Google's guidelines on what constitutes a doorway page, which basically means that you're trying to have too big a search footprint versus what you actually do. So I actually got stung by this in 2015, and that's because I had a client that did, I don't know how well this translates, did skip hire, so like the big yellow metal bins that you get when you're getting your house renovated, right? And they felt they needed to have skip hire for every single tiny village in the whole of England as a landing page. Unfortunately, skip hire is skip hire. There's not a lot to say about it, so for them that was a huge doorway problem. So this gives us a new rule to add to that checklist. The pages that we're putting into our architecture need to be diverse and not be seen as doorway pages. Great. But then simultaneously, it wasn't just Google updating, but we were also updating how we fulfill orders. And that's because globalization's a thing. So we could suddenly deliver pretty much everywhere. So no longer did you just want your website saying you work in the UK, you want it to say you work everywhere. And then there was a dominance of one-stop shops like Amazon, eBay, Tesco. And what we saw was this happening, basically what happened on the high street when all the big brands took over, that's then happened again online. So it gives us another rule. You have to be competitive at a global scale and do more if you want to win. And that makes another complexity for what we put into our site architectures. And then a bit more recently, Google's been focusing on EAT. It really, really cares about you being authoritative. And that means it doesn't want you to be like the jack of all trades. It wants you to be really good at just the one thing that you do. And that means you have to give really clear signals on your expertise by being super, super relevant. So relevancy becomes the third rule. Now, if you're me, you look at this and you go, well, the two in the middle, they contradict each other. So you want me to be really competitive and do everything, but also you want me to be hyper, hyper relevant. That's kind of hard to build into an architecture. So those of you that pay really close attention and read the talk bio would see that I had 8 steps. There's actually only 7, purely because we're going to get this done so fast. So we're going to talk through the stages that I go through when I'm recommending to a client an site architecture. and a few of the tools that I use to do it. So the first one is knowing your niche. Who knows where this is from? People that have heard me speak before. So your purple cow is like the thing that makes you stand out in the field and the thing that makes you completely unique. It's a Seth Godin, theory from one of his books. And it's all about just actually what's going to make you different to every competitor. And whilst it seems counterintuitive to like start with a build your brand thing when you're building a site architecture, it's really important to nail this down so you know what you want Google to see from you. We tell our clients they need to simplify it to one statement. What we call it is your commander's intent. So if you go into battle, and I always use this analogy, and I literally know nothing about going to war, so it's terrible. But if I'm told that I need to take ownership of that bit of land over there, great, that's the goal, yeah? But if my director, my commander told me to get to that bit of land over there that you need to steal, you have to go round. And I was told I have to walk all the way down here and go all the way round, fine. But if this guy here gets up and stops me, what do? Because I didn't know what the end goal was. So if you have a really clear single statement end goal, you empower people to get to that goal. This will make sense in a minute, don't worry. And then that will help you understand how people are shopping and what they need, and then what your site needs to do in order to do that. And it should give you a really clear, oh, that's the mic that's on. Okay, cool. I won't hold to then. No, not listening. Right. And also you just have to be aware that you've made these choices because most sites and most businesses don't actually have infinite budget. I'm assuming none of you work for a brand with infinite budget? Great. So that means that you have to do things and make compromises. If you can nail down those initial points, then you can make compromises on scale, quality, range of product, that sort of thing down the line. There we go. So we're now going to talk about benchmarking against your competitors. Really functional to start with. We always look at the number of pages indexed and we categorize them by transactional, informational, navigational, and hierarchical. One of the talks earlier basically said that these pages all start to overlap. Yes, they do. Unfortunately, you have to find a way to categorize things. So commit and make those calls. And then what level each page sits upon. And as you can see here, some of the competitors don't get to level 3 and level 4. That's really interesting for us to know that the flatter architecture is working well for them. We then look at users. So we also look at we give it a UX score, and we look at like the average word count per page, images on page, links, and reviews that are appearing on those pages. By collating all of that information together, it gives us a nice feel as to how much depth we should go into. So if we're debating between if we need 100 pages or 50, and then we know the average word count, if they're all really long pages, then perhaps we need fewer pages and we consolidate. But maybe in our sector, lots and lots of short pages works more effectively. So we make calls based on a sector choice rather than just generally. And then we also just look at what the best performing page types are. Again, we split this by transactional, informational, navigational, but you can kind of do what you want. And we look again at links and load speed to give them an optimization score on those pages. It just helps us understand what we're going to be putting into our website. And then we ask our clients to think about the future now. And the reason we do that is because you need to know exactly where you're going to go to, roughly. So things about like what's going to happen if you decide you're going to expand internationally, because then you need to know, like, we have clients that are set up on a .co.uk site, but they have a /US folder, and then they have /DE. And that's a bit of a contradiction, having like a TLD for your country, but then that. And that's because like they don't own their .com or something silly like that, and they'd already built on a smaller site thinking they wouldn't scale. Think about how you'd add additional domains, subdomains. If you're going to add a content hub, is that going to sit as a subdomain or is it going to sit in a folder? And what's the next step? Are you going to go for a vertical expansion in product, or are you going to go across in range? I think this is the question we ask all of our clients, because they normally go, we're going to sell 50,000 products and we're going to do amazing. Is if your e-commerce site is selling 1,000 products, you're really diluting your equity there. So you might risk ranking page 2 for all of them. But what happens if you were only selling 100 products, but you're ranking top 2 or top 3 for all of them? You're going to make more money. So we ask them to really prioritize what they want. And then to think carefully about international as well. So you have to do international well and to actually rank, you have to be able to deliver on that. So if you're trying to rank in the US, but you actually don't do any work in the US and you don't have service there and you don't have product there, then you're probably not going to rank in the US. Like, Google is now smart enough to understand, and to understand that just a hreflang tag doesn't mean your business operates there. So that means you need to build authority separately in those markets, so only be scaling to those online if you're actually capable. And make sure you're transcreating, not just translating. We work for a big hair care company, and with them, like, the words used around like braiding and plaiting and stuff like that is so different across countries despite being the same language, that they wouldn't even understand what we're on about. So anything we're doing when we're building an architecture, we make sure we start from the beginning with every single place. And then we build a keyword landscape for them, and we base our architecture off this landscape that we build. So we use our keyword clustering tool. Now, this is something we've built in-house. I can give you access to it if you want to play around with it. It's also based on IBM Watson's API, so you could possibly make it yourselves. And what we're doing here is we put in all of the keywords that we're working on in a sector, and then it runs a series of things on it, and it will automatically cluster them for us. And it will cluster them into kind of groupings that we would call like our category level groups. And then we like manually assess and check it's not messed up and all of that, because machines. But it also scores things like emotion and attitude based on the words that we're using. So it helps to really inform what that structure is going to look like. Typically, we end up using those clusters as the category levels on our main navigation if they pass our other tests as well. So it gathers our terms like this. We end up with a really cute little pivot table thing at the end. And you can see that we put in search volume against them and competition as well as rankings. And we start to tag them up based on portfolio, sub-portfolio, and so on. Ooh, that animated. How exciting. Sorry. Okay, right. So once they're grouped together, semantic analysis happens, blah, blah, blah. We get these little scores here. And you can see we ended up here. We started with 250 keywords-ish. We ended up with 17 clusters. To me, that's still quite like a lot of clusters or categories. So then we'd go through and we'd refine that further to make sure it makes sense to the user as well as to our machine. And then we tend to give group labels and start to build out the taxonomy here as well. And we turn it into a hierarchy. Let's keep going. We're going to skip that. We're going to talk about prioritizing. This is terrible, but this tells us exactly what the priority is. We obviously don't do this manually. So when we're prioritizing, we give each section or each portfolio of keywords a particular weighting from 0 to 1 that tells us how much we think we can win there. We then use that to inform what definitely goes in the architecture. So things that are scoring a 1 or like a 0.8 upwards are things we think you can win here, even if you're a new website or you're starting your architecture from scratch. So prioritize those ones first. Again, this is built into the tool now, so if you're using the tool, you can do all of this together. And then we just map it out basically and say, cool, we need to put domains into this, put URLs into it, great. And that gives us kind of a structure here. That was complicated. So if you don't want to build things like that and do it all yourself, yes, you can use our tool, you can use lots of other tools that do it for you. But for me, there's some really simple things you can do, which is understand that your offline proposition doesn't have to match with your online. A lot of companies think instantly if they launch something in store, they have to launch it on their website. You don't. So you can actually keep your online much smaller if you don't have time to do that additional research. and just do better basically that way. And actually stop over-engineering and put the user first. So think like, if you were the user, how would you get to that page? What would you expect to see? What information do you need? And how would you understand what the site's about? If you're doing it for a user, typically you will be fine in terms of actually getting a robot to understand it. Check your internal links. Like, this is really basic. This tool is called LinkDex, but pretty much every SEO tool in the market does this. Tells you the inbound links that come into that particular page. Just check for anomalies on your current site structure, but also plan this beforehand. When you're building a site from scratch, write down what's going to be your pages and what's going to link to what, and have your numbers ready, and then you can cross-check you've built it correctly. But also build relevant connections online. So sometimes you might have a really cool idea and you want to put it on your site, but you're going to be competing. This is when you would use outreach, and we'd say, cool, why don't we put it on another site, because then we get a link, but also that content's going to exist and be useful for our users. You don't have to own your entire landscape in one place. No? Cool. Then for developing internal linking, we work off a calculation for internal page rank. The next slides get really like dully designed, but let's see what happens. So I'm making two assumptions here. So the first is that external page rank is going to use like a page-by-page proxy effectively. And two, that this is page rank within one site. So it's really, the way we do it is easy to score page by page and say everything on hannahthorpe.com relates like this, but you couldn't compare hannahthorpe.com to lucas.com. That just wouldn't work. So first thing you need to do is do a bulk export of all of your outlinks on the website. We do this using Screaming Frog. Again, you can do it using pretty much any crawler. You have to get your list for all URLs for your site as well. Again, Screaming Frog is a good option. And then we take an external page level metric to act as a proxy here. So we typically would use Ahrefs or Moz for this. I personally prefer Ahrefs for this, or URL Profiler. And you're going to get a score for every URL that you have on your site, and then you have all those outbound links. And then you need to download RStudio if you don't have it. And you can just put this code in. Don't touch your CSV from Screaming Frog, that's the best tip. You input this in, and it's going to output you, eventually, something that will look like a horrible spreadsheet, so we're not going to show you. But then you put that horrible spreadsheet into this, which is gephi.org. Again, all of this is free. Put it into that, and it's going to actually draw you what your link looks like. And then all you have to do is you change the color of all the dots and the size, so you're changing your nodes and your edges, and that's going to give you a visualization like we had at the beginning. Like, that's the same site as the original one. Everyone with me? Vaguely? Cool. That's really hard to explain really quickly in slides. That's my email address. We have like a 30-page document that takes you through how to do that and what all the tools are. I can send it to you because I'm aware that that's really confusing to be like, put this code in a tool. Did everyone get that? People were taking pictures. Cool. And then a couple of basics, which is just build it the right way. Make sure all your main navigation is accessible in HTML or CSS. JavaScript's lovely and all that, but like the way it's handled is still not right. And every time something is handled incorrectly by a crawler because it's in JavaScript, you're risking your site navigation not working. If you go on the Found site at the moment, we have that exact problem. So it happens to all of us, but just be really, really specific. Make sure you're using a sitemap index because that's going to help you control your architecture more in future. Make plans and policies. So I think the biggest one is who has the control to manage this. So I worked on a site where someone somehow worked out that they could put all of our blog content not in the blog folder. That obviously caused a massive sprawl on our site architecture, and we couldn't accurately manage it and check it and see what was indexed. And obviously if you're working on lots of separate sitemaps, you can submit them through Search Console and see how well indexed each sitemap version is. And that's going to just give you a lot more granular data than what you would get from having it all in one place. So obviously, control is like the key here. Like, don't let people add things. Don't let people say they want a new category. Don't let people run special promotions. Like, make sure it's all signed off and is part of this plan. And make a plan for retiring and deleting content, products, categories, so you don't just end up with empty categories. There we go. 7 steps, done in like 24 minutes. That is everything. That was whirlwind pace for architecture. So if anyone's got any questions, you're welcome to ask. Slides will be available, and I can answer anything you have. Thank you. Questions? Stephen?
How long does it usually take to go through the whole site architecture process for you guys?
It depends probably on scale, like what they're trying to do. So using that tool, we recently just built one for the hair care client, and we did 10,000 keywords within 2 days of work. But like for that was intense. We typically say to clients, try and give us 2 to 3 weeks to plan your entire architecture for you so we know what you're doing.
Any more questions? Coming to your side.
Run, Alex, run.
Yeah, I can do that. I'm just trying my best.
Thanks a lot for your speech. I have one question about the clustering of the keywords. You said that you're using IBM Watson's API, right? Mm-hmm. Does it cluster the keywords using the like just meaning of the word, or it also analyze the SERPs? Because as I understand, we like can rely on the real situation in SERP if we analyze the SERP. Does IBM Watson do it or not?
So it doesn't. What we do have is we pull in, what tool is it? I think the SEMrush API it is that we're pulling in, or it's the Authoritas API that we pull in to add SERP data on top. IBM Watson just by itself won't do that. The reason we had to do that was we worked for a recruitment company, and they really wanted to call everything they did talent management. And when we put it into the clustering tool, everything clustered really weirdly, and we were like, what's going on? And we discovered that the intent of talent management has got like several meanings, and it didn't match with the perceived meaning from Google, and it just broke the whole thing. So it is the sort of thing where you have to be quite manual when you apply kind of logic to it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Cool.
Somebody else? I'll pass the micro.
Do you want to run the conference? Are we done? Cool. Thank you very much. I think there's a panel now.